please ask your questions in the chat box. You can ask them in Korean, Spanish, or in English in the chat box. And then we will leave time for question answering at the end. So there will be time to get those questions answered. And so when we start, I do want everyone to be reminded we do have online questionnaires that were sent out with the invitations to the presentation. And so these questionnaires help us to gather information about how the presentation is for you, if you are learning new things, and then that helps us to potentially get new funding for our program to continue, where we can give more presentations like this. We also always want to thank Alabama Council on Developmental Disabilities, who provided this funding to us. And they also provided funding to Mr. Chandler, who is our presenter today. We feel very honored to have him come and speak with all of our participants. So our introductions. I am Dr. Drew. You're probably tired of hearing me introduce myself. I'm an assistant professor at Auburn University, and I work with families and adolescents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Dr. Hill?
Yes, hi everybody. Glad you're here and glad we've gotten everybody situated and where they need to be. And we're very excited to have Korean interpreters as well from AKEEP in Montgomery, and they are also funded by ACDD. So we are very excited. This is a collaboration of agencies, and we wouldn't be here without the Alabama Council on Developmental Disabilities. Oh, and I'm the director of the Regional Autism Network and faculty at Auburn. It's Maria's turn.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Gutierrez. I am the family navigator for the Regional Autism number 4. We cover 20 counties, and I am super excited that finally we got this opportunity to have somebody that we've been wanting him to present for our families. So Mr. Dustin Chandler, and I hope that the families get a lot of information, because I know that this is a topic that we all worry about it, you know, for our little ones and our people with developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities. So thank you for being here on this Friday evening.
And I'm going to let Mr. Chandler share his screen. I do want to say that the questionnaires are in the chat box to take the questionnaire if you have not yet had a chance to do that. All right, Mr. Chandler, you're up.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Let me try to share my screen. I may have to hit a setting or two on my side. So let me get where I need to go. Got to pull it all up here. Share. And let's see. Are we, do you guys see Community Safety and Awareness Program? All right, I hope you didn't see anything else on my personal screen, right? I didn't have anything embarrassing pop up. Awesome. The kids, you never know, I've got 3 kids. And I get you guys want me to go ahead and start the program and everything and just let you know when I'm done.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, my name is Dustin Chandler. I'm with Interaction Advisory Group. We are a company that was founded in 2015. I'm the co-founder and the president of the company. We founded IAG, as we commonly refer to it as, in 2015, like I said, to really address some issues that we saw from the training aspect of training law enforcement and other first responders on really how best ways to interact with individuals with autism or developmental disabilities. So we founded that. We've been doing it going on 6 years now. We do a lot of work in Alabama, of course. We have a lot of work going on in Louisiana and in kind of this Southeast region. I'm a former police officer of about 10 years. I worked patrol most of my career. So I come from a law enforcement background with a lot of information. Been in the first response community a lot. Our training has really turned into really hyper focus on law enforcement over the past 6 years, though we train all first responders but we've had a real high attendance rate and percentage of law enforcement. So I do have a law enforcement background, got to do a lot of really neat things in law enforcement. It was a great career. I got out of law enforcement around the time my daughter was diagnosed. I've got 3 children. I got a 12-year-old son, and I've got 2 daughters, one 10 and one that is 7. And my 10-year-old has developmental disability. She's got a disorder called CDKL5 deficiency disorder. That is a genetic disorder, not that it's passed down with genes, it's just a genetic, it is a deletion on the CDKL5 gene. So that causes her developmental delay. And she has also intractable epilepsy. So she has a lot of struggles, and really that is what put me in front of you today, is really connecting with the disability community as a whole. Really understanding parents' perspective, because I am a parent going through a lot of things, and I've been in law enforcement. And that is really what we looked at as a company when I founded the company, was how can we truly impact, really, improve the lives of people with autism and developmental disability from my perspective as law enforcement. And that was to start training cops and other first responders on things that they need to know about for our developmental disability community. So I come from a police officer perspective a lot of times, but also know that I'm a parent. I understand the struggles parents are going through, because I too go through those struggles pretty much every day. I understand a lot of things from both perspectives. So the company itself, IAG, it really tries to mesh the two worlds together for a better understanding, and also to have really hopefully better understanding, which leads to awareness, obviously, which we really hope leads to more acceptance in our society. And we're kind of doing it from the first responders perspective. That is what we are about. We also involve self-advocates. Really quick, I always want to give our self-advocates their due respect and their kudos to them. They help us inside our trainings. We work with an advisory board that is made up of self-advocates, those with autism and developmental disability, as well as law enforcement and school psychologists and a clinical psychologist. So we really try to involve everybody in the effort. It takes a group effort to really pull all this training off in the curriculum that we have on the first responder side and community side. So always want to tell them thank you. Tonight, you're going to hear kind of our community kind of safety program on really what we think is important for you guys to know as parents or advocates or caregivers. It's really just an information that kind of lets you know kind of what I would recommend if I was a police officer, and I was for such a long time, is how do we interact safely with police, and what information do they really need to know about our children or our loved one to really have that as a safer interaction. So really tonight is really about safety. Some of this information you are probably going to know. Other stuff may be a new idea to you that you can kind of write down and take notes and have things that you may want to implement. And if all of it's just a review of things that you were already doing, then that is awesome. And hopefully you're doing some of this stuff. But if you're not, you've got new things to do at home. So it's really revolved around safety. When we are training police officers, we always tell them we are out there in the community doing the best we can to work with you guys and with others on trying to have a better understanding of both groups. So we see this as a two-way training street. We're going to train you guys up a little bit tonight on, safer interactions with the police, and also what do police need to know to really help us out if they come to help us with a loved one. What do we see as beneficial for that to be a smooth interaction? And it is for the best possible outcome that we can ever have. So it's all about safety tonight. If you have questions, please, you can put them in chat. I'm assuming somebody may be monitoring chat. It will be hard for me to get into chat, but I believe somebody will be monitoring that. So I appreciate everybody for asking me, Maria, Doris, and Dr. Drew, Dr. Hill, for letting me come tonight. So thank you. I should have said that first. All right, so they mentioned it. I will also mention this. We always have to give our great thanks to the Alabama Council on Developmental Disabilities. We're very thankful to them. That training that we talk about with police officers and first responders, we couldn't do any of that without the DD Council. So we are just like the previous, we always have to give thanks. They're doing wonderful and great things. We always suggest, if you're ever interested in the council or anything about them, obviously to contact them. There's their phone number, their email, the generic email address you can send to, but they really do need a lot of credit. They got a lot of great programs like they were talking about earlier, and a lot of this isn't really possible without them. So we also give thanks as well. So just getting started, I don't really know the makeup of the room. I'm sure there's different people and caregivers and maybe self-advocates that they're from different things. We always just like to give general information. A lot of people have never really seen some definitions, and these are really just to be a refresher for a lot of people. Really just to give people an idea. You would be amazed at how many families could be diagnosed or have a loved one with autism and don't know too much about technically what autism is. And these are just brief definitions. The important thing that we look at, just to let you know how we see things, is we know it's a developmental period issue sometimes with the way things are developing. My daughter is that way as well. So we know these things. And in autism, we talk about autism a good bit in training. That autism have certain barriers with communication, the repetitive patterns that they have with behavior and thought, and obviously communication is big. We want to give you tonight, obviously, things that are going to help police officers to help you. And you will hear that throughout tonight, and me repeating a few things because we think it's important. But these are just things really just to read over. It's just trying to give everybody an idea. Really, the three biggest groups in developmental disability under that umbrella are intellectual disability, which it's sometimes called intellectual and developmental disabilities, and autism, and then cerebral palsy is very big as well. We talk about autism in our class, but we really group it all under developmental disability. And that just gives you a quick overview of ASD. Some caregivers call it ASD and not autism. And then there's other examples of developmental disabilities as well. And when we talk about interactions with law enforcement, a lot of this, again, maybe stuff that you are already doing. It's going to seem like, well, these are things that, of course, everybody's going to do it, but I think sometimes we tend to forget. And we just want to have a good outcome with anybody in law enforcement, whether that's going to be getting pulled over in a vehicle, whether you have to call 911, whatever it might be. We want every interaction to be safe. So, and we dive kind of right into it with interactions with police officers. And this is true for self-advocates as well. We have done self-advocate only training, meaning we had their caregivers, if they wanted to come, or self-advocates, people living with developmental disability, or they could be autistic. And we just kind of give them this general knowledge and information, because we want self-advocates. We know just because you have been diagnosed with autism or developmental disability, really you're going to be doing a lot of great things in the world. You're going to be driving cars. You'll be out in the community. You'll be doing wonderful things. And obviously, if you're driving a car, you could get pulled over. A traffic stop is sometimes one of the most nervous times for people in general. I was nervous when I got pulled over when I was a youngster. That was always a thing for me. But, as a police officer, I got to see that side. And this is just kind of information to kind of let you know. And please pass it on for caregivers. Pass this information on to your loved one that could be getting into the driving age. Or if you are a driver of a car and you get pulled over and your loved one is with you, we get into that a little bit later as well. So, we want to follow all lawful orders from police officers. It seems like a simple thing to really understand. If an officer is asking us to do something, I can't tell you how many times as a police officer, I would ask somebody to do something and either they didn't want to do it or they didn't think they have to do it. And these are lawful orders from police. And the best way, people want to resolve things as quickly as possible. And the best way to do a lot of that stuff is to comply with the officer and do, if he's giving you a lawful order, to go ahead and do that. That is when we start non-compliance, is when a lot of things can get sideways, and we don't want anything to get sideways with police. We want to kind of, comply with the lawful order and do what we have to do to make sure that we're on our way. And we don't want any time to be any kind of, any chances to make mistakes. So following lawful orders is kind of number one. I know that's compliance. Sometimes you may not agree with a traffic stop, and we go over that and what happens on the traffic stop. But on a traffic stop, when an officer is there at the vehicle, obviously that they're there for a reason. They've pulled you over for a reason. There could be more than one officer on a traffic stop. A lot of times I was asked a question, and one of the main questions I always got was, why are there so many police officers on one traffic stop when there's only one person in the vehicle? And really, that's a lot to do with safety. Police officers back each other up when they're on shift. And it's just, you could have more than one officer on a traffic stop. And that is not meaning that you've done anything wrong. That is just something that could happen. And if you see that happen, it's not meaning that they think you're guilty of anything. It could just be that they have extra officers there just for their protection. Because they don't know who they're pulling over. It's nothing to say anybody on this call or anybody is doing anything wrong. It's just they don't know who they pull over. So that was something very common that I would get asked, is why are other officers on the traffic stop? And it's typically more than likely that mostly the case that they're just making sure that they're backing each other up. We mentioned tickets a little bit earlier. Nobody likes to get tickets or a citation. If you get a ticket, it is my advice. I have told my own parents this and my own loved ones. If you get a ticket, don't argue with the police officer. Arguing on the side of the road typically does not solve really anything. We want to, comply with the lawful orders. If you get a ticket and you do not agree with it, there is a system set up to go argue and contest that ticket. Obviously, we would highly suggest, as we are a self-advocate, to bring a caregiver, somebody with you or a loved one with you that can help you out with that. But there's a system for that, and that's really through the municipal court or the court system that would be in that jurisdiction. And if you feel like that you did not deserve that ticket, or you feel like you have a case to be made, then you can have your voice heard. And that is something I would suggest to anybody, that obviously the court system is set up for that. And please go have your voice heard. I went to court a lot of times for people that I would write tickets for, and they would contest them. I would have to show up as a police officer and really give my side of the story. So that does take place, and your voice is heard. And that is the place to do it, not really on the side of the interstate or on the side of the road to argue with a police officer. And we would always advise against that because that's usually doesn't resolve anything. Where would your hands be necessary to be? I understand it's a nervous time. I understand it could be the first time you've ever been pulled over. I mean, please be mindful. Obviously, the hands are what officers want to see. We would suggest you keep them on top of the steering wheel. Don't be reaching under your seat. Don't be reaching in a middle console. Don't be reaching in the glove box or behind your seat. It is just best to keep those hands on top of the steering wheel. And until you're asked to do something, obviously, you can then tell them, and we'll go over that in a second. You can kind of explain what you're about to do. But as a police officer approaching a car, they don't know who's in the car, and reaching under the seat or in your pockets or anything like that could make a police officer nervous. We don't want to make anybody nervous, obviously. So just keep your hands up onto the top of the steering wheel. That's the easiest thing to do. And not just be reaching in places where they can't see, because they're going to want to see the hands. I was like that as a police officer, and it would really make me nervous if I couldn't see somebody's hands. So please just make sure they're on top of the steering wheel and just wait for them to, obviously they'll introduce themselves as a police officer more than likely, tell you why they pulled you over. And then obviously if you're going to do something, you can explain kind of what you're going to do when they ask you for the driver's license, as you're complying with what they're wanting you to do. And, we, on our advisory board, we have police officers. And one of the things that they brought up as we were kind of going through information, the guys that were on our advisory board just wants people to understand that officers can be direct at times. And they just don't want that to be misinterpreted as being rude to somebody. I was very direct in my career in law enforcement. And it's just, I guess it's just part about being a police officer, is being very direct with your commands and the way that they talk. Not every time that they're being rude, even though you may think they're being rude, they may not be purposefully being rude. So just remember that they can be very direct when they're interacting with people. And sometimes it's going to feel like they're being rude, and other times it's just them being very direct. And again, the one of the most important things on that last slide is obviously the complying with a lawful order. When they ask you for a driver's license, I would suggest telling the officer where your identification is, where it's located inside the vehicle or on your person, and say, if they ask you for a driver's license and on a traffic stop, obviously you want to tell them where that is. And if they ask you for it, they're going to be expecting it. Just let them know where it is and tell them you're going to retrieve it. And let them know where it is. If it's in a middle console, then my license is in a purse or a wallet in the middle console, and then retrieve those things. So where there's no, nothing unexpected that they think is going to happen, that you're getting what they asked for, and that's exactly what you're doing. And just explain that to them. If you have a disclosure card about your child's diagnosis, which we think is important, we'll kind of go over that in a minute again. But if you carry a disclosure card, that's a card that would be giving information about your loved one with a developmental disability. It could be their condition. You just want them to have that. Or if it is on their person, your child is driving the car and the self-advocate is driving the vehicle and they have a disclosure card, well, the time to give them that disclosure card. And please, if you have a young a loved one that is about to be driving, and you want them to have an autism card or the developmental disability card, giving caregiver information and information about them and we'll go over in class on what we feel is important, then please let them know when the proper time to give them that card is. We don't want any kind of mistake being made on going into you reaching into the pocket and making somebody nervous. Wait to give that. Along with your driver's license or identification if they ask for it, and just wait to be asked for that. And that would be the proper time to do that. We're real big on disclosure on the information that they would need to know to help that interaction be the best it can. And we want to get them that information. If it's in the form of a disclosure card, then the information's on a card. We just don't want anybody to be reaching in their pockets or somewhere too fast and it be misinterpreted as they're going for something else. So please just work with self-advocates, and it's maybe sometimes a discussion. It could be more of a teachable moment, but just let them know when and kind of where to keep that, and then when to give that to a police officer especially. And that would hopefully cut down on any kind of mistakes that could be made. This is one of my favorite sayings on the third bullet point here. One of my favorite sayings, I said this all the time as a police officer. When I would ask a question, if there was a gun inside a vehicle, I asked that a lot in my career. And I would back it up. Usually I would probably say this beforehand. Answer my questions. This would be me as a police officer. Answer my questions by speaking, not with your hands. Don't show me with your hands. So for example, if I ask somebody for their driver's license, or if they had a gun, especially if I ask somebody if they had a gun in the vehicle, it is amazing how human behavior is and human nature. You're wanting to, you're saying, yes, there is, and I have a license for it and everything's great. And you're going to show them, but you're showing them with your hands. Obviously, if they're asking about that or anything like that, it's better to just answer questions with by speaking and not with your hands. So if they ask you for a driver's license, that's again when I would say, it's in my front pocket, it's in my back pocket, it's in my wallet in the middle console. Is it okay if I get it? They'll know what you're going to be doing at that point, and you're asking or you're answering questions without showing with your hands. And that's just a very big thing. It was for me, and that's why I put it in here. I'd always say answer with your mouth, not your hands, is what I would say. And that's just to hopefully cut back on anything that would be dangerous for them or dangerous for you as well. Obviously, we've already gone over this, but it's worth repeating again. Always keep your hands where an officer can see them. That is really what makes police officers nervous. Again, it made me nervous. So always keep them where you can keep your hands where they can see them, and try the best you can to keep your hands out of your pockets. Having hands in pockets is a very nervous time for me, as when I was a police officer, and I know it would be today. So just keep your hands where people can see them, where the police officer can see them. Be polite and respectful, as we expect the police to be respectful to us. We are in training classes. And maybe not every day, but just about every other day, we're doing a training class, kind of helping police officers understand the disability community, the autism community, all sorts of great advocates and self-advocates, trying to get them to understand that these interactions could be a little bit different. We are telling them in the same training the training that we have for them, and it's kind of the same sentence that we bring into this training. is we're asking them to be respectful to us. It is a big deal for me for them to obviously be respectful to us as the community. But then it's like I said earlier, it's a two-way training street. And so we want to be respectful to police as much as we can, hopefully all the time, and be very polite. Even if you disagree with them, it is just better to be respectful and polite. And again, we went over, you can always challenge stuff in a court. We just want to be respectful on the street. Or on the side of the road, or anytime you're interacting with police. But again, please know, we're on the training when the police officers are in our training class, we are asking them to also be polite and respectful to us as well in the disability community. I always say it's great, especially for self-advocates, along with their caregivers, is to really go and meet your local police and fire department, your firefighters and your police officers. Reach out to organizations in your area to see if they have community days. I fully understand the pandemic has kind of made a lot of in-person things, not as accessible. But when you have a chance, set up meetings and meet police officers before there's an emergency. It's my belief if we can get a better understanding for each other before an emergency, then we kind of know before we go, kind of thing, or we know before we call a police officer. They may know us, and we always want to be friends, really, with everybody. They're there to protect us. They're there to do a lot of things. It could be a medical emergency. It doesn't always have to be police. It could be a medical emergency, and they will know you if you just stop by and say hey to them. We always say do that. I think it's just a good idea to get to know each other, before an emergency happens. And if we know each other, I think that leads to a better understanding and really better interactions, if that's possible. Again, I know pandemic kind of limits that a little bit, but we always would suggest caregivers, parents, and caregiver can be anybody really. The parents, the self-advocates, if you have young children or if they're old children or whatever, just to get to know them. And I promise you, if you reached out to them and asked if you could come by and visit and set that up, they would be more than welcome, or be more than welcoming to you. So we just want you to get to know the people that are serving you in the community. And we ask them on the thing, it's kind of the other flip side of the coin, is we want them to get to know you guys and have community days at their facility. All right, is there any questions at this point? Does anybody see any questions? Am I going too fast? Am I going just right? Am I going too slow?
There are a couple of questions,
Okay,
and I've been sending it to Dr. Drew. So if you want to continue, I will say if you go a little bit slower, so because sometimes it's kind of hard for our interpreters to kind of catch up in all the terminology, especially since this is something new. But I guess there are some great questions.
Yeah, I will. That's why I asked if I was going too fast. Thank you.
I think slowing down like between the bullets helps them catch up.
All right. Sounds good. I will do that for sure.
We have some good questions, but some of them are going to be addressed later in the presentation. So if it's okay with everyone, we may just wait till the end.
All right. Yeah, and we can do that too. I just want to make sure I was not going too fast. I can tend to talk a little bit quick, so I always ask if I'm going too quickly. All right. So now we want to kind of go over, that is a short, really short thing about interacting with police. It's really just important, just as a review, to really respect police officers, comply with lawful orders, and really, kind of try to make it the best interaction that you can make it. You don't always have to agree with the police. I understand that if you think you got a ticket or a citation that you shouldn't have, there is a system to be able to share your side of the story, and that's where I would suggest doing that, as always. So, and also keeping your hands where they can see them at all times. Now we kind of get into, and that was very brief, but we get into more of a developing a safety action plan. This information as we go through, please understand that I believe this should be done before you may have to call police or maybe have to call the paramedics or anything like that before an emergency situation. A lot of times some of this stuff is not so easy to think about. And I know a lot of people just don't want to think about emergencies and things that they may have to have. We just think it's important because once a first responder gets to your location, they're able to serve you a little bit better. So it's just good to have this plan developed before an emergency situation. So when you have downtime at home, or it's late at night before you go to bed, before you turn into bed, maybe start working on it and piecing that together, because you just never know when you're going to have an emergency situation, and you want to really have a plan for it. So again, all this should be done and really compiled and gathered up before the emergency happens. Is what would be the best practice. And obviously it's very important to have it done before. I'll just leave it at that. This is what we call a personal action list. This is our own form. There could be other forms out there that you've seen that you can use. This is information that we think is important to have gathered before an emergency. We share this form with police where they can share with the community as well. And we want you to have it. And we can get copies of this sent to you. I believe they've been translated over in different languages. We've got them on our website, and we're actually going to post the Spanish and the Korean version as well that we've been sent. But this is a personal action list. We call it a PAL form. It's voluntary information. So this is information you want to share. Nobody is forcing you to share this information. I challenge parents and caregivers that don't want to share a lot of information about their loved ones sometimes because they don't want to share a lot of information about their loved one. And I understand that in certain circumstances, in certain situations, but we're talking about emergency situations, and it could be life or death situations. So we want to share them disclose to them as much as possible. And this just kind of gives you an idea of what we think is important and what we think police should know, or fire departments should know, or any kind of first responder you may come in contact with. And as you can see there, that's exactly what ours looks like. Again, this is voluntary information. But if you have a child or an adult or your caregiver for somebody, it's good to know what their likes and their dislikes are. That really helps. And the way we train on the first responder side is that really helps them create a rapport with somebody, or it allows somebody to know what they don't like. And we want to try to avoid those things. So putting those things down are very important. Obviously, the name, address, and a phone number, the basic contact information is very important, just in case that is needed for some reason. It's right there. The date of birth is always important, so they can be identified. Medical diagnosis, there may be multiple. There could be comorbid conditions or multiple conditions that may be diagnosed with. Then people need to know that as well, because we know certain things, certain behaviors or certain things come with other diagnoses, and it's just good to know up front what those are. And that could be for the medical side of things on first responders, that they wouldn't need to know stuff. Caregiver information, that's highly important, that if they found this person by themselves, or they needed help with your loved one, well, then they would have the information on who to call. We are very big and training on keeping the caregiver involved. The caregiver knows a lot of information about their loved one. The caregiver can help out the first responder, and we want the first responder working with the caregiver if obviously that is able to be done. We want that to happen, and they won't know unless they have the information. So caregivers' contact information and their name. And again, that's to try to help the interaction go better. And have the caregiver involved in the interaction. And, when we talk about caregivers being involved in interactions with police, it doesn't mean that the caregiver is going to be able to get a person out of trouble or be able to tell a police officer what to do. It would just help the interaction. If there's communication difficulty, obviously, well, then a caregiver needs to be contacted if that's the case, or it could be something else. It's just good. When we talk about wandering in a little bit, it's very important to have caregiver information, that if we locate a child, who do we call? And sometimes, like my daughter, she is nonverbal. She's not going to be able to tell you her name. So we just think it's important to have caregiver information there. The de-escalation techniques is somewhat self-explanatory. If there's anything that if your child has escalated behavior at any time, or any type of behavior that somebody may not be used to, and you know how to de-escalate that situation, whether that be with a toy or whether that be with another coping item. That could really be a lot of different things, but trying to put down those main points of de-escalation techniques, because that is what we want to occur first. That if we have escalated behavior, the training really is to really de-escalate behavior first. That's the best safe first step. That's to keep the individual safe. That's to keep the first responder safe. And it's just good to have those written down. And then obviously at the bottom, there's really any additional information that you'd like to add. You can write on the back of the form, anything that you want to add. We'll talk about PAL forms again, but it's worth mentioning this stuff is really compiled before an emergency. We talk about it a good bit in Wandering. I haven't mentioned the recent photo yet, but it's important to have a recent photo on there. Don't always rely on a first responder system to have somebody's picture. If they're a young child like my kids, they don't have a picture in any system. They're all in my cell phone or they're all on the computer. We want to have a recent photo of them. And when I say recent, keep it recent up to, every 3 to 6 months. Put a new photo on there. And it seems like this may never be needed. And I pray that it is never needed. However, if your child is missing, again, I will repeat this again. But if your child goes missing, if my child goes missing, if anybody has children and they are missing for more than, say, whatever time you would be uncomfortable with them missing, you're not going to be thinking clearly. And the questions that police officers may be asking you, you're not thinking as clear as you would because you have a child missing. Get all this on paper and get it down, what you think that they need to know. That way, if you ever have to use one of these, they respond to your location, because somebody will, if that is the case. And you can just hand them this sheet and they've got all the information right there in front of them. So it's kind of doing the thinking for you and what information that they may need to know. Because I'm a parent as well, and I would be hysterically not thinking clearly, so I would want it written down. And this just kind of helps you group your thoughts together for that. We kind of went over some of those bullet points. The next to last bullet point on this slide, it's very important, I feel, if you can, get this information down and you can turn it into your local dispatch. That would be when you call 911, your call goes to a dispatch call center. And if it's in whatever city you're in, they have a dispatch call center. I would fill this information out and volunteer it to them, and they can enter it into their system. Nobody else sees that information except for the authorities that need to see it. That's important to know, that this is not public information. This is still your information. It's going into a system that not just anybody has access to. It's only would be accessed in the case of an emergency. So if they have this information before and it's really logged in with their dispatch call center and you called 911, it would pop up most of the time, if they've got the system, most of them do now, that it would pop up that this additional information is in their system. That would kind of be the first thing that they would see, hopefully. You would also have it at home. And then that communication really is there, that they know if they come to your house, your child may have, A, B, and C disorder, and this is what's going on. And here are the de-escalation techniques that may work. And ask them, when you turn this into them, ask them to put it in and log it with your home address. It's just good practice. Again, this is not public information. This is private information that only emergency responders would have access to. You may have to turn this into a police dispatch and a fire dispatch. That may be the case. You just need to ask them. But again, that goes back to the saying that I like to say, know before you go. We want police and fire departments and emergency responders to know before they get there. A lot of times they may misinterpret something. We don't want any misinterpretation. We'd rather them have the information before they get to us. All right. I'm trying to give a little pause in case anybody needs to catch up with me. And it's important to know too, you may live in a city that already has a program. I know certain cities around the Birmingham area anyway, certain dispatch cities, some of these agencies already have a program. You could have your personal action list and go to want to turn it in. They may have their own form. If that's the case, that's what their program is, and you can participate in that program. That is fully obviously okay to do that. But there are several agencies across Alabama that do not have their own program. So it's kind of just having taken the initiative and kind of having forward thinking that if there was an emergency, this is the information. So some agencies have it. You can ask about it. You can always call their non-emergency number. Don't call 911 for this. You would call in a non-emergency number to talk with somebody and say, hey, do y'all have sometimes it's called a disability registry. It could be an autism registry, whatever it is, you can ask them and they'll probably know what you're talking about. And if they have that system, feel free to go ahead and participate in that system. And if they don't, while you're turning this personal action list to them, you can say, hey, it would be good if y'all had some kind of database for that. And maybe they've never heard of doing that before. So that is just good information to have. We'll mention PAL forms again in a minute. Let me get to the next slide. Okay, so this, it is always, it is oftentimes people don't know what information to disclose. This is going to sound like repetitive information. Well, you just talked about a PAL form and then now we're talking about this. Well, it kind of is the same and it's just good. It's worth repeating. A lot of times parents and caregivers that I've spoke to over the last 6 years, they really don't know what information to disclose. Disclosure information is really, it seems private. It seems, hey, I don't want anybody to know this about my child. And I fully understand that. But if we're in an emergency situation, we would want you to disclose it on the law enforcement side and the first responder side because it helps them do their job. So that's how I would think of this is it's voluntarily given to them. So nobody is forcing you to do this. But it's sometimes best to disclose beforehand, like we said, have it on information. And what information is that obviously you can read here as well. What information is that should you disclose? Again, this is in emergency situations. Emergency situations that somebody is going to need to be helping you in an emergency situation that you're in. So this is not going out to the public. But for police and fire, it's just about the same. They need to know all kind of the same stuff, the de-escalation techniques, obviously the individual's name. A lot of times it's hard for police sometimes to get people's name and just share their name with them, obviously. And that helps them know who it is and everything that might be going on. And they can call them by their name. So that's obviously there. Any kind of tracking technology, we kind of go over that toward the end as well. But if you have a tracking device, whether it be Project Lifesaver or any other kind of device that you're using currently, or if you're going to use one in the future, it's important to have that information written down somewhere. Obviously, the police and fire department would need to know that because it would help them locate your child or your loved one, whoever you're caring for. Have that written down. Sometimes it'll come with an ID code or an ID. Project Lifesaver does. I mean, they need to know certain information. And so have that written down so you don't forget it and it's in one place and you can hand that over. So that's very important. We talk about really briefly if your loved one, if they have sensory sensitivities, it's very important, I think, for police and fire department and really anybody that could be responding to you in an emergency to let them know about what those sensory sensitivities are, if you know them. Some parents and caregivers know what those sensory sensitivities are. Sometimes they don't, but if you know them, and we know that flashing lights or loud noises, certain things may bother them, then that's just good information to share as well, because that would help them keep everything as safe as possible. Because if you know flashing lights really bothers your child, and you know that they're going to run away if they see flashing lights of any kind, then that's good information for people to know where they can cut their lights, their flashing lights before they get to your residence, because nobody wants a child running away from a house just because of lights. So not letting people know about sensory sensitivities in the emergency world is very important. Obviously, you see there again, the caregiver contact info. If somebody locates a child, they have to know how to get in touch with them. And so that's just information to know. You know, this stuff could also be given, you know, if they come to your house tomorrow for an emergency, if you have a medical emergency and they're there at your location, at your house, well, then share it with them right there. You don't, you know, we always say, go to the department to do it. Well, if they come to your house on an emergency situation, then obviously you could turn it to them there. Obviously, fire departments are a little bit different because they've got multiple fire stations that cover different regions. So they have different ones you could go to as well. I should have mentioned that earlier. Also, we would advise if you're on the current medication or your loved one's on a current medication, the medics may need to know that. Again, sometimes in emergency situations, you know, it's hard to think clearly because the stress level is up, the anxiety level is up, and just having that stuff written down. A lot of times you'll have medics ask you for, you know, the bottles and everything, but if you have everything written down in the dosage, it's very important for fire medics to know that. Obviously, just in case if the person they're caring for is incapacitated or passed out or something that they can't tell them, or they're nonverbal and there's not a caregiver around, they would have that information on the disclosure form, like the PAL form, or on a homemade list that you have at home. So we think that's very important information for the medics to know, obviously. And then the school resource officer, I'm pretty sure everybody's heard of a school resource officer. That's really a police officer that's in school, and then they're known as a school resource officer. They're there really for, you know, they're there for protection on certain things. They shouldn't be there, in my opinion, on behavioral issues. They're there for protection on certain situations. You know, it's really up to you if you think that they need to know certain things about your child in school. You know, it should a plan, some kind of a safety action plan be told to them in an IEP meeting. Should they be a part of the IEP meeting? I would highly suggest you guys think about that. Not saying you have to do it, but if your kid is attending school and, you know, there could be some issues at school that pop up, sensory sensitivities or anything like that, it's good for everybody to be on the same page. It's really all about being on the same team. We call it the A team. It's all about being on the same team. If you feel the school resource officer needs to know about that because they might be involved in your opinion, then we think it's important for them to know that information. Teachers are not giving them that information. Special education teachers aren't giving them that information. Administration's not giving them that information. That's really going to be up to you if you want them to have that. We always instruct school resource officers to know their students. We want school resource officers to know their students and know that, you know how to manage certain situations and not have any kind of situation escalate if possible. But sometimes the school resource officers don't know who our kiddos are in our schools. And so sometimes it's up to us. So that's just a suggestion. That's not something I feel like you have to do, but it's a suggestion that if you think that the school resource officer may be involved in managing a certain situation, that they need to know certain things, then sometimes it's going to be up to you for that. And if they have an IEP, obviously you can talk to the IEP team about it. Should they be a part of the IEP team? And that's really going to be strictly up to you guys. If it's health or safety, if it has to do with health or safety, we feel like it's important for the whole team to know. The health and safety of our children is paramount. Obviously their education is paramount as well. That's why they're in school. Health and safety, if it has to do with health and safety, we would suggest letting the IEP team know about it. You can ask for suggestions on how to make sure, you know, that all possible players on any kind of interaction that may interact with a child know that too, because it deals with health and safety. We want the best environment for our students to learn. And sometimes, you know, like my daughter has certain behaviors. We let their friends know if they come over to our house that my daughter screams and it can catch you off guard. We just think they should know that. So, obviously, if you think they should know something with health or safety, that's the two big ones. Health or safety, we feel that the whole team at school needs to know. Again, that's voluntary information. You can think about it, think if it's important, if it has to do with health or safety, that might be something the whole team needs to know. And that includes the school resource officer. Sometimes they're referred to as your SRO, if you've ever heard of that. So we think that's an important thing to think about. Wandering is a big issue. This is sometimes a hard thing to talk about for some parents because it may scare you. I don't like talking about it because most of the times they're negative examples because children wander a lot. But we know that statistically is true with autism in specifics, but any really developmental disability, there could be a chance somebody wanders. Of course, we also know dementia. People with dementia or Alzheimer's may wander too. So, but when we talk about developmental disability, we know if you were an autism family, this is very, very important, but don't discount this information. If you don't have a child with autism, it's still really going to remain relevant because wandering can be a deadly event. And we're losing too many children and people to wandering instances. So I know it's sometimes hard to think about that. If your child wanders, what would you do? This is why we kind of have these trainings to kind of briefly discuss it and let you know that wandering is a major issue and it can be a deadly issue. A lot of times it is deadly. And again, this goes back to safety of your child and your loved one. In this segment, don't discount wandering just because your child is older and they've never wandered before. So I don't have to worry about wandering anymore. We don't feel like that is true. While they may not have wandered the first 14 years of their life and now they're 15, they could still wander. It just happened to a personal friend of mine that her child never wandered and he's 17 years old. He has never left the house, and all of a sudden, this was about 4 months ago. He left the house and at 3:30 in the morning, and they found him alive. Thank goodness. They found him alive in a Walmart. So, and it was like 6 miles down the road. So don't get stuck thinking it's only for small kids. It could be an adolescent or an older, your loved one is a little bit older. It is really never something that you should ever take lightly, no matter what age. So always keep it in your mind. So when we're talking about autism, it's really 48-49%. I mean, the number hovers around in there. Children that are diagnosed with autism will wander. That's what the statistics show us. All the research that's been done, I mean, that's almost half of children that are diagnosed will wander at some point. Obviously, we just mentioned it. In other developmental disabilities, this could happen with as well. I know several children that have dual diagnosis of autism and Down syndrome. And people think they only have Down syndrome and they could be autistic as well. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be going on. I would just use this as a safety measure for any of your loved ones that may have a developmental disability. That's the easiest way to think about it. So while we know it's statistically high in autism, if your child does not have autism and they have another developmental disability, keep it in your mind and just plan for safety. That's just really an easy way to think about that. We mentioned it a little bit earlier. If you have a loved one with dementia or Alzheimer's, obviously that too, a lot of people know that sometimes that they will wander. So we know wandering exists there. We know it's high in autism and other developmental disabilities. So just think about that. Don't just get thinking it's only for autism. It could be for other developmental disabilities. All right. It's unknown phenomenon on why children and people will wander. There's a lot of thought process around it. A lot of great minds have looked at it, and it could be things that they're getting away from that they don't like. I mean, there's been studies that have been done, but in my opinion, we know it could happen. Knowing why it happens would be wonderful if we knew every case on why people wander, then we could probably pinpoint everything. But really, autism and developmental disability is really individualistic anyway. So knowing why one person may wander is going to be totally different for the next. And sometimes that's hard to figure out. But studies have been done that will show that sometimes it's during commotion or stress. They're trying to get away from a certain situation, going to see things that they like. Sometimes it happens statistically, it'll happen when they're away from their home and they're in unfamiliar. When people are traveling, it will happen then too. It's really just good to know that it happens. It's really unknown on why each person will wander, what would be their trigger point to wander. So really, it's just good to know that they may do it. I know that seems simple, but this is happening really probably on a daily basis, and we just don't want it to happen to you. And if it does, we want to find them as soon as possible. Sometimes it's called elopement or bolting. Bolting, a lot of times, they'll just take off and run. We know that to be true really in autism as well, that, sometimes in certain situations, high anxiety and stress, it could be sensory overload, as sometimes some people call it, and they'll just take off running. Just be mindful of that. But, again, you may be a newly diagnosed parent. You may have been an advocate for 10 or 15 years. Just know that this stuff can happen. So if you're in any situation that could potentially happen to you or to your child in that situation, then it becomes obviously a serious situation if that happens. So just know that it could. That is obviously good information for officers and fire department to know as well, that they could wander. That we train on this a good bit. It's a whole segment in our first responder class as well. The important thing here to understand that while we know some cases on why children may wander, it's good for parents and advocates and caregivers to know that wandering does happen. And it's a kind of an unknown phenomenon, and at any time and at any place. I think that is really the best way to think about it. We can go looking at all the studies in the world, and all the studies are going to tell us that this may occur and this may occur. And guess what? That was yesterday's information, and today's a new day. So we look at it, and what we want to tell caregivers, their loved ones, and everybody trying to keep things safe, that wandering can happen any place at any time of the day. And just be prepared for it, that this could happen at any time, any place. Don't think that everything is great at the house and everybody loves everything going on. They can still wander. So even in perfect situations, this could happen. And again, it's kind of unknown why it could just happen. Just know it can happen at any time. We want you to develop a plan for that. We call it being on par. And that's prepare, alert, and response. Again, it's important to remember that along with the disclosure information, this needs to be in your mind and prepared for before a wandering event. Very important to understand, before a wandering event takes place. So if this does happen, how should you be thinking to prepare for that? And if it does happen, what should you be doing? Obviously prepare for it. You need to be prepared. Now that you know about wandering, and it can happen really in any kind of case in developmental disability, have your personal action list ready. You're prepared that if it does, you may not be thinking clearly. I would not be thinking clearly if my child was missing. I would want that information down. So if an officer responds, I have that information to give them. That's where that PAL list, the PAL form, is very helpful. You can provide it on request. If I have a child missing and it's my child, when the responding officer comes into my house to talk to me about things, I'm going to hand them the PAL form and say, that's the information about my child, because it's all on one piece of paper. It's just very important. Have a current photo. I know that sounds like that's kind of going to be a pain in the neck to keep a current photo on a form at your house. We got to be prepared. If you've got a child that is 16 that wandered and you've got a 6-year-old picture of them on your PAL form, that doesn't do much good, because obviously they have changed their appearance in 10 years. Okay. So have a current photo. Your disclosure card is very important. If they have one on them, sometimes if you're going to do a disclosure card and that's the information that you can homemade, I know the autism community can get one through their public health department by providing them the form, all the necessary medical forms. If they have a disclosure card, if they're going to school, make sure that disclosure card with them is somewhere in their backpack. If you can keep it on them at any time, that would be great. But sometimes we know in wandering that children will take off their clothes and they're not going to have a disclosure card. So that might not be a possibility, but at least maybe have one in their wallet or something that you don't think that they're going to lose, and have that disclosure card. So if they are found, they've got caregiver information and everything on their person that they can share with, or the officer or the first responder can find and then get in touch with you. Obviously, we talk about the safety action plan, and that's really being prepared, learning, and response. Tracking technology, you can always reach out to us, and obviously Maria, Dr. Drew, and Dr. Hill. We can always get you information on tracking technology. There are so many different tracking technologies. Even over the past 6 years, there's different tracking technologies. Know that they're out there. You can search for them online. You can ask around in the disability community. A lot of people know what tracking technologies are. Some people are not aware that they're there. Everybody tends to have a cell phone these days. Some people don't. If you don't have a cell phone, I would look into Project Lifesaver. Project Lifesaver is the name of the program. Most counties in Alabama, I used to could say all 67 counties, but I don't think all 67 counties do anymore. And that's unexplainable to me. But check with your county sheriff's office. All right, your county sheriff's office should know about Project Lifesaver. Most counties most counties cover the cost for that device. I can't say that's true for every county. I believe Shelby County does. I don't believe Jefferson County does. So it's all county specific. But Project Lifesaver is a very important tool. If you don't have a cell phone or something, that's something that really is a program that is administered by the sheriff's office. If your child goes missing, they have the equipment to try to locate them with a beacon. Now, with tracking technology, since we're talking about it again, we understand that sometimes children or adults or your loved one may not wear a device. I understand that. Sometimes these are bracelets. Sometimes they could be a necklace or something else. If your child or loved one has a sensory sensitivity of touch and certain things, touching them, that's something obviously to think about. And you may sometimes have to think outside the box and try to figure out how they would keep that beacon or whatever it is on their person. We have had parents tell us that their child would always, they would never wear a bracelet. They would never wear a necklace because they would take it off. They would break it. Now this is really getting creative. They would take the beacon. It was only about that big. They would sew a pocket on the interior part of their clothes, usually their pants or their jeans, a little pocket, and they could slide it inside that little pocket. That is really thinking outside the box. They had a wanderer that was an escape artist, and that's kind of how they address that issue. So it would have to be the right tracking technology that would work for you and your family. But please know that they're out there, and you can reach out to me. You can reach out to, as I said, Dr. Drew, Dr. Hill, and Maria. They can point you in those directions. Just know that they're there. Remain vigilant. This can happen at any time. That's part of the preparedness, is you always being on your toes. Always have your eyes on your children, especially if they have autism or developmental disability. I know that's probably second nature to you already, but please remember, if you're out in public, make sure you're watching them. If you're even at home outside, watch them. Having extra locks on your doors inside, some parents do that. Just know that could be a possibility, and just be very vigilant on watching them. When we're talking about alert, really quickly, I understand it can be embarrassing sometimes that your child is missing and you can't find them. and you're going to try to look for them first. That's human nature. If you can't find them within a very quick time that you think is a reasonable amount of time, you should find them. Call 911 immediately. Do not wait calling 911. Don't call your mother or your brother or your sister or your friend to tell them that your child's missing. Call 911 immediately. People get, I know when I was a law enforcement officer, there would be a really big emergency and people would always call their parents first, or their loved one or their husband or their wife or their partner or whatever it was. And it was always baffling to me why they didn't call 911 first. I still can't explain that. My own mother has done that. My dad would have a medical emergency just 2 weeks ago. She called me first. It was kind of a stroke my dad was having, and she called me. Don't call me, call 911 and get the emergency responders to your location. Please don't hesitate to call 911. Time is of the essence when we're talking about wandering, of course. Call them really quick. Call them as quick as you can. It may be embarrassing to you, but we've got to find your child and we want to find them. So call them immediately. Listen, this involving neighbors, letting people catch up if they need to. I may be talking too fast again. Involving neighbors is really up to you. We have known instances where neighbors were made aware that their child was autistic beforehand. That is strictly voluntarily done. We just know that is done and it worked well. And it was because their child wandered just about every day and multiple times a day. But it could be something that if you really know your neighbor really well, maybe you want to tell them, maybe you don't want to tell your entire neighborhood. That is strictly something up for you to decide. But if you involve the neighbors that you're really close with and they know the situation, they can sometimes be extra eyes and ears. And so we know that has been done. Sometimes that's in a practice, alerting your neighbors that this could happen. They could be your eyes and ears out there for you and could see your child without you. And if that's the case, they know that they need to call the emergency number 911. Notifying school or daycare when you alert them. If I have a child missing, and you need to alert the your daycare and the facility to know that as well. Again, that's a health or safety thing for the school or the daycare. Don't assume that they're always going to know it. I would say, hey, my child could wander. I just want you to know that information. Schools will most of the time have things set up for those kind of plans if they have a missing student. Daycares are all individualistic as well. It's just good to notify them that could happen. That's kind of going over into the prepare side of things. But too, if your child has wandered, notify the school or daycare if you can get somebody on the phone, because how do we know they don't go to the school or back to wherever there could be a day program. Make sure that they know as well in that response. You can have that on your PAL form, contact this place because it could be the place that they've wandered off to. We don't know that, but it could be. Notifying family members, that's important because they can get out and start searching if this event has taken place. Your family members should know that beforehand, that could happen, especially your immediate family. And what are you going to do if your child goes missing? And again, this isn't just a small child. It could be somebody that's older. Notify your family members and have them mobilized to start looking. Time is of the essence. We want everybody to look if we can. Obviously, PAL forms are again on the alert part of it. If police show up, you give them that PAL form. Know about your tracking technology. On the response, it's kind of just exactly what we talked about, but it's just kind of how things are going to respond. When police show up, how do we respond? When the police show up, how should they approach your child? They're going to be wanting to find your child. That's number one. But if there are certain things that could occur, then you need to tell the police officers this. We always say that canine search and rescue should be deployed as quickly as possible. Please know that not every agency has a canine search and rescue. These are search dogs. There are actually certain search dog associations to help with that effort, but not every agency has a canine unit. We suggest the agencies get their canine unit, if they have access to one, out immediately. Dogs can search faster than humans. I mean, it is proven all the time, dogs search faster than humans. We want them out to find a child alive or a loved one alive, okay? If your child doesn't like animals and doesn't like dogs, the officers need to know that. We want to find them alive and as quickly as possible. So they may be out, but make sure that the officers know the things like that in case that they find your child and they know how to approach them. Tell the police and fire everything about the child likes and dislikes. That can help them in searching as well. We're telling them kind of where and how to search, but sometimes the child or adult will go where they like to frequent. And if that's the case, they can look there. That's not the only place to look, but they'll know that kind of thing. And likes and dislikes also means if they like certain things like we were talking about earlier, then they'll want to kind of, talk about them when they locate them. They may locate them 20 miles from you and it takes time to get to you, and to help calm them down, they can talk about things that they like. And also things that they dislike, they don't want to be doing those things. And that's really, the response. Police are going to respond to your house. Be prepared, have your information ready, and hand it to the police officer. And we hope that the police officer obviously knows what to do with that information, and they will disperse that information out as quickly as possible. But when that responding officer gets there, just kind of have your thoughts on paper. We tell people all the time in these training classes, this sounds easy. Hey, you're asking information that I know off the top of my head really fast. In an emergency situation, you're going to be very nervous. You're going to be hysterical because you don't know where your child is, and you're not going to be psychologically, you're upset. And I would be too. So that's why we think it's important to be prepared before this happens. What they're wearing, that even may be hard to remember. So be prepared for this. So when they do respond to your house, you can give them that information. All right. It's just important to have this done beforehand. Where do they wander? Obviously really fast. Don't focus on a single place. The officers are being trained this. You can tell them, don't think you're always going to know where they're going to go. You don't always know where they're going to go. You may think they're going to go to a certain place 10 times out of 10. They're just not going to. They may go to different places. It can happen really fast. That's why we think it's obviously important to call 911 as quick as you can, because they've gotten out of your house. You didn't know about it because it happened so fast. You just turned around. Now you're back in the room that you were in and they're gone. Just remember, children can cover great distances in a short period of time. It seems amazing to think about, but small kids can cover a great distance really, really fast. So just be mindful of that. That's why we think the response has to be very fast, and calling 911 has to be pretty quick. So don't think where they're going to go, and they can cover a great amount of distance and time. This is a big issue in autism. We know statistically is drowning. Drowning is one of the leading causes of death in autism. That is something to commit to memory. Commit that to memory. Drowning is one of the leading causes of death in autism, among some other things, but it's one of the highest things that are going to take our loved ones away from us. So know that is the case. If that is the case, know where bodies of water are around your residence. Know where the bodies of water are around your residence. If you have a child missing and they have autism or another developmental disability, go to those bodies of water first. It's unfortunate, but it's true that there is a fatal attraction to bodies of water, and they're going to find bodies of water. You need to know what bodies of water. That could be swimming pools, that could be lakes, rivers, small retention ponds. That could be sewage treatment plants. That could be any body of water. I mean, waterfalls at malls, waterfall at around your area that's just a fountain and it just has a big concrete thing with water. That's a body of water. Know where those are. Drowning is a leading cause of death in autism. There have been studies over a 3-year period of time, and 91% of the fatalities associated with wandering were due to drowning, accidental drowning. It's a big issue. Know where your bodies of water are. If you have a swimming pool, if your neighbor has a swimming pool, above ground, in ground, it doesn't matter. Know what those are. And if your child goes missing, you got to search those first. Now, while you are searching or making your way to the body of water, you're looking at everywhere dangerous. We have got to understand as a group of people in this class that sometimes people with autism and developmental disability do not perceive danger the way that we do, and that they will end up in very compromised positions in a very dangerous situation. That could be water towers. We know a lot of children that like areas of great height, power poles, transformers, anything dangerous that y'all have got to put your eyes on. Now, obviously, emergency responders need to know this as well. That's why you can write that down on your PAL form. They may not know it. They may not have ever taken my class. They hear it from me. We know where to look and what might be very dangerous. Well, that's sometimes where children are found. So know that we have unfortunately had a high number. To me is really 1 or more. I would like the number to be 0. But we've had children play on train tracks, not know that that is dangerous, and they've actually been physically hit by a train. They don't perceive danger a lot of times the way that we do as parents or as caregivers. So you've got to look at those places, areas of highway traffic. I mean, we work with self-advocates all the time. I know of a gentleman right now that if he gets nervous or stressed out and he doesn't have his coping item with him, he will take off running, and he's run in the middle of traffic before. And he's about 23 years old. So it's kind of a perception of danger. It's a perceptual difference that you guys have of danger and that they may have of danger. So you have to look in those areas as well. And off the beaten path. Off the beaten path really means that they're not going to, sometimes they're not going to be in the easiest places to look. They're going to be in the hard places to look. And that's why canine search and rescue is important. They could be off the beaten path. They're not going to be sitting there. Sometimes people, children with autism especially, sometimes will have a difficulty asking for help. So they're not going to be sitting there raising their hand and saying, hey, I'm over here. That's probably not going to be the case. So you have to put eyeballs on that. Okay, so looking at dangerous places, looking at your bodies of water is highly important. I can't stress that enough because we know the statistic in drowning. Know where your bodies of water are, swimming pools and everything. Just know where they are around your residence or wherever that you frequently go. Just know where those are. Even if you visit a friend's house, know kind of mentally picture where those bodies of water are around there, because it can happen, and it happens very fast. All right. If you already know something that could trigger wandering, like loud noises, sensory sensitivities, if you already have that information, then obviously keep that in mind all the time, anywhere that you go. Sometimes fireworks does it a lot of times. So those are loud noises. Just know the dangers of wandering and that it can happen at any place. You may want to consider extra locks on your doors, as was mentioned before, alarms on your houses or your residence, wherever that you stay. I know those a lot of times are paid features, and you may not want to pay for them, but if you do have an alarm, sometimes those alarms, most of them have the feature that if a door opens, it will chirp. Any kind of exterior door, that's something to look into. Anything that you think is obviously going to help them stay in the house. A lot of people are going to cameras around the perimeter of their house, and you can set up some geofencing. That just means a geographical area you can set. That if that is, if a lot of cameras do this, I'm sure they're all a little bit different. But if you can set up a geofence that if something goes outside of that parameter, it'll alert you on your cell phone. Apps are great things these days. Again, those could be paid features. but it's just worth looking into, where you'll have eyes on the outside of your house at all times, if possible. There's some of the tracking technology listed there. Those are just a few that we just put in the slide. Angel Sense is a fairly popular one. There's Project Lifesaver again. And you can write some of these down, but again, it's a quick internet search if you have access to the internet. If you do not, I fully understand that. Again, reaching out to your local, support group if you have one, or Dr. Hill or any of us involved in this will be able to help you out trying to find something that would work for you. Just keep in mind, some of those features are paid for features, and you would have to just make that decision if that's within your personal budget or not. But obviously, if it has to do with health or safety, it's very important. And additional safety tips, that's kind of talking about wandering. Obviously, it's a huge deal. Please know it happens. It could happen. If you are a newly diagnosed parent with a child with autism, that's very important. You've got a leg up on a lot of people. We have actually had people in our class that had no clue about wandering, and they have 11-year-olds. So not everybody knows this information. So please, if you know it, you need to know it. I mean, that's great. If you have friends that have children with developmental disabilities, just mention it to them. Additional safety tips, really fast. This is kind of the end of the presentation. We'll get to questions. Have a fire safety plan. Have a fire safety plan. That means in case of a fire, what are you going to do? Where does everybody go? Everybody should have one of these. It doesn't really have to just do with developmental disability. Everybody should have a fire safety plan. How to exit your residence or wherever you live, how to exit, where are you going to meet up, where you know that you have everybody. PAL forms are obviously important that you could keep around. If it's a burning building or a house, you want to get out. PAL form, just leave it. Hopefully you have turned that into the fire department. I have done this myself personally. I have gotten with my local fire department. My daughter is nonverbal and she's also non-ambulatory. That means she cannot walk. I have let my local fire department know exactly where her bedroom is. I didn't let my neighbors know where her bedroom was. I didn't let anybody else know where their bedroom was, but the fire department, I let her know where her bedroom was. And I bet you can guess why. Because if there's a fire at my house and you do not see my daughter, that's because she cannot yell for help and she is not going to be able to get out of the house by herself. And I could be already perished. Don't save me. My daughter is at this location. Get her out. So that's something to consider, especially for nonverbal children like my daughter, and especially if they're non-ambulatory, and that could be any loved one. Let them know where that location is. They know exactly where a room is. So that is something to think about. We would always suggest practicing your fire home drill, going over that with them. If your child has therapy at school or they're working with them on other things, you could kind of incorporate that in with a therapist, letting them know the importance of a fire drill and letting them know how to get out of the house the quickest way possible if the house catches fire. We know also, unfortunately, in autism and other developmental disabilities, but we know it true in autism, they will be out of the house and they'll run back into the house. That has happened too many times. Know that could happen. If you have a fire safety plan, you've got everybody at the house, and then keep them secure. Don't take your eye off of them. That's important for the first responders to know as well, that they may run right back into a structure fire. And also know a lot of times they will hide because they feel safe. Help teach them that it's not safe to hide or anything away from a fire, because you can't get away from it. You got to get out. And then also go over with them too, if you can. Sometimes they have issues with school fire drills. Just be mindful of it and kind of discuss those things with them if you can, if you have children that are old enough, and help them kind of try to understand that. But especially at home, have a fire safety plan. And lastly, swim lessons. These extra things that you can help them understand is swim lesson. Just because you have autism or developmental disabilities does not mean you can't learn how to swim. They can learn how to swim. It's just something good to look into. Introduce them to swimming. Obviously, we know drowning is a big deal. Swimming could obviously help out with that, possibly. So it's just good to know that. If you contact a swim instructor, you can obviously ask around your friends, your circle, your sphere of influence, or your circle of friends or support groups, and ask who works well with people with developmental disabilities. And you can find that. And then obviously, if you have a swimming pool, please make sure it's secure. That means have some kind of fencing around it. They make temporary fencing that you can put up. It is just smart for young children in general, but also with autism and developmental disability. If that's one of your loved ones, have something up around the perimeter of that pool where they can't access that pool. Just know that. That's regardless if they can swim or not. I would just have that extra barrier there for safety purposes. All right, and just know really fast, just know that in autism and other developmental disabilities, my daughter has severe seizures. Know that they can occur. If they haven't occurred, they could occur. I mean, 1 in 10 people are going to have a seizure in their lifetime. Statistically, in autism, it's about 30 to 40%. They could. Just know that these are a possibility with really anybody. There is seizure first aid certifications out there that you can take for free. They're online. I think it takes about an hour and 15 minutes. And it's just good general information about seizures and how to keep somebody safe during a seizure. Just something to think about because we know that those things can occur in developmental disabilities and really with anybody. We always suggest that. I'll open it up for questions really fast. There's my website at the bottom. You can always look up my contact information at the website. I'll also put it in chat, or Dr. Drew or Dr. Hill can if they want to. But that is our website. Feel free to go there and contact us anytime for any kind of questions or any kind of guidance. We can always be the source of the source. So if we don't know it, we will make sure we point you in the correct direction, the proper direction to get the help that you need. So I will open it up for questions. Hopefully I didn't go too fast with that, Dr. Drew or whomever.
Well,
just let me know.
We have a few questions in chat. And unfortunately, Maria, Zoom is having a little bit of a fit today. So she lost her chat. She had sent me some, but if we miss any, we can always, if you want to email them to Maria or put them back in the chat, we can get them figured out. So if I miss your question at the end, we can circle back to it. So there's one message. It says, in my county, the police are not very friendly with some Hispanic people, and I'm kind of afraid to take my child, who is definitely a risk for eloping, to meet them and us. Any advice on how best to approach them?
Well, obviously we want them to be friendly to everybody. And I understand that feeling that you might have. The best way to approach it, I would obviously, if there's a potential language barrier, if they don't have an interpreter, find somebody that can. And I would really just contact them probably on the phone first.
Could you, real quick,
Yeah.
one of the interpreters asked if we could repeat the question.
Okay, go ahead.
We have had, you don't know, Dustin, behind the scenes, people popping off and back on and in and out because of the issues with Zoom and the weather outside. So,
okay.
So we tried to keep it running smooth, and I think we did, but now the chat part, we got to try to catch up.
Okay, that's fine.
So go ahead and ask the question again.
Yeah, so this is a person asking, saying that they have noticed that the police in their area are not very friendly toward the Hispanic people. And so they are asking the best way to go in, any strategies to go and help the meeting go smoothly between them and the police, because their child is a risk for eloping.
Yeah, so, I understand those sentiments that you may feel like they're not very friendly. I understand that. The two suggestions I would have, if you want to, probably the first suggestion I would be is to get with a local support group or a local nonprofit in your area and have them facilitate those meetings if there is one. If not, it is really simply calling up to the police department and getting in touch with somebody. I would do it via the phone.
Mm-hmm.
and kind of explain the situation. Not the situation that you think they're rude. Don't say that. But the situation of, listen, my child is a risk for elopement and wandering. We would love to meet you. What would be a good time? And really come from a friendly thing. And they should be friendly in response to that. I sure hope they would be. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, I would find a local, if they're autistic, there might be a local autism group, or you could create some friends that want to do it as a group. If that would make you feel more comfortable to call up and go as a group, to really introduce them. I just think that is very important to meet in non-emergency situations. I just think that's very important. Listen, our children, your child, my child, every child that I've ever met really enriches other people's lives. And they could change somebody's perspective on disability, could change people's perspective on autism, just by you introducing your child to them. But I understand that you might feel that way. So I would call in a friendly way. And again, you may feel more comfortable doing it with a group of friends. But if you have issues, you can contact the ladies here. We can try to help do that with you. I'll call the police department for you and just say, listen, what would be the best ways for them to do that? And I'm more than happy to track down that kind of that information for you, because I understand approaching police officers can be very intimidating. It can be sometimes that you feel like they may not be as nice. So if you need help with that, we can help you with that, just to try to facilitate something and then kind of get you that information. But if there's a group, I would work with a group. And then if not, just call them, on their non-emergency number, and just explain the situation and your desire for them to meet your child, and for you to meet them and explain the situation that's going on.
And I just want to echo that Maria and Dr. Hill and I are happy to facilitate meetings. I have gone to school meetings with folks, and while police meetings would be different, and it's lovely for Mr. Chandler because he has that insider perspective, even having someone who is a professional and who can help you navigate could relieve some stress that you're feeling, and also brings a different level of communication ability to the situation. So I would say, we're happy to support you. And if Mr. Chandler can, that's great. And, he's very busy. If he's not available, we're also happy to do that. Okay, and then
before we go to the next question, I just wanted to remind people about the links in the chat for the surveys. If you haven't filled it out, go ahead and is the post test up?
Yeah, so they're the same thing. So I just can't copy them. And I think Maria has those links. So if Maria wants to email them she had to log out and back in on her phone. Zoom is really having a moment. So
okay, we're going to try to get those links up again. I didn't mean to interrupt, but instead of waiting until the end, go ahead.
That's smart. Okay, another question is, I have a son who engages in a lot of self-stimulatory behaviors. He is a large person, and I'm concerned about how best it is to teach him to comply in a situation like that. Do you have any suggestions?
That is something we leave up to kind of the parents. I mean, that is working maybe with therapists and professionals that handle those type of things. Oftentimes that may or may not be able to be accomplished. That's why we think it is a very important for you to help, on these PAL forms, and let them know that, certain conditions, especially autism and developmental disability as a whole, really, sometimes they don't understand instructions very well. They don't understand directions. and commands. It is very important that obviously work with your child as you see fit with the therapy side of things. I can tell you on the police side of things, at the very bare minimum, you need to tell the police officers what I just said and what you just asked about. My son may not respond to questions. He may not respond to your commands because of this condition. That's why we feel like disclosure is very important. We hope by you telling them, they will understand that they may not respond to certain commands. And that is the reason why. That is part of our training on the first responder side of things, is helping them understand if a caregiver tells you that their son or their daughter is autistic or whatever the condition may be, that they may not fully understand what's going on and may not comply with you. And it's not because they don't want to comply, it's they don't understand the why of compliance, if that makes sense. And it's important for them to know that, but it's important for the caregiver to let the officer, especially the police officers, know that they may not respond to that. That's why it's very important, we feel, to try to get that information to the agency of where they may be dispatched from. If you have to call 911, or I understand traffic stops could be a little tricky because they could be different areas, but at least have that information somewhere where you are in your local agency where they'll know that. That's why that's important.
All right, we've got 2 questions about school resource officers. They were asked before you talked about school resource officers, so they might have kind of already been answered, but basically, what role does the school resource officer have if my child is getting in trouble in school?
Well, listen, to try to answer that question on what SROs are doing in every school, you would really need to ask the local admin at your school, what is the role the school resource officer plays with any interactions with the students. They should be able to answer that question. Some SROs do not get involved in behavioral situations. They let the teachers handle that. But we also know of SROs that do get involved in that. And SROs are there for a certain reason. And I think it's something that you need to ask your school admin and get a full understanding on when they may interact and when they may not. If you feel like they may interact with your loved one, and it has to deal with health or safety, they may need to know certain information on how they need. What the previous question was also plays, it also rings true inside schools. And the SRO may not know that if he's giving them command to do something, they may not fully understand because of what's going on. So I would talk to the administration about that, whoever is over the SRO at school. And I would get specifics about how does the SRO interact with the students if there is a situation that may take place, and what is the SRO's role in that?
And as someone who taught in schools, it is really variable based on the school, based on the individual officer, based on the school district. So I just want to echo that talking directly with the principal, talking directly with the SRO can really make a difference in how involved they are and how much information they have. There is also a question about the autism ID, and I just looked that up. It's $10, and you have to fill out an application. I think Maria and Dr. Hill have sent out information about that before.
Can I just add one thing to that really fast? I just want to reiterate, those cards they're through usually the county public health department. Some counties are really quick in getting you, when you process the information and get it to them, they get you the cards fairly fast. I have heard of other counties that are not so fast. That's going to be individual counties. I still think it is through the public health department in your county. You can always contact them by phone and make sure before you go down there. Also, it is very important that if you have your child or your loved one carry a disclosure card, to help them understand when to present that card. The time to present that card is not immediately and dig in their pockets, because that is having hands in pockets, they need to see their hands. So if they're going to show a police officer or somebody that ID, especially police, the best time to show that would be when they're asking for ID or something to identify themselves. They can have it by their ID and give it to them. We don't want any, on our side, obviously as parents, we don't want any kind of mistakes to be made because they thought we were getting something out of our pocket when we weren't. So please just work with your loved one on when the proper time is and help them understand that.
And that could be social stories if
Sure.
that works for your loved one, and then also role play. So practicing, how to give it, when to give it, can be really good. Okay, so I am in Harvest, Madison County. I went to several police stations and the fire department to ask about the Yellow Dot program. Most of them did not know what I was talking about. So how do I know if the first responders are trained? How can I feel sure that they will act accordingly to the information I provide?
I would love to answer that and say that everybody who wants to be trained, everybody has been trained, and we have trained every police officer and agency in the state, but I can't. Listen, that's why we created the company. That is why we're out there doing as much as we can every day to try to get to these locations. That's why the DD Council has been very gracious with that program, trying to reach as many people as we can in the first responder community. There's really no guarantee that each individual officer is going to have that kind of training and have the understanding. I wish I could say everybody is going to know that, and there's just no way to guarantee that. Short of them being trained on it, at least the very bare minimum you can do if you interact with them is let them know, hey, my child, has autism and they may do this. That at least gets them the information. We hope they would know what to do with the information. There's just really no guarantee. There are a lot of police officers in the state of Alabama and really around this country. There is a lot. We're doing the best that we can. We've been very fortunate to train thousands of police officers. There's just thousands more that have not been trained. You can always go to your city leadership. If there's a liaison in the city, you can always go to them. You can request for them to have disability training or autism training. You can share our information with them. You can share our information with the city leaders. You can share it with the police chief. I have found a lot of parents have more luck if they go to the city leadership first. That we have a different approach because we have connections all through law enforcement in many different areas. On your side, on the public side, contacting somebody with city leadership and asking them and sharing the information. It may be an instance where they don't even know that this training exists. So educating them that this training does exist, and you would really like for them to have it because you have a loved one in their jurisdiction, and all they have to do is contact us. We work with them to set up days and times to train with our calendars, and we will go train them, and we will handle everything else from there if they contact us.
And on a personal note, I have done this with the Opelika Police Department because that is where I live. I reached out directly to the chief of police, not in my Auburn capacity, just as a citizen of Opelika. He responded very quickly. He let me know that, that disability training was a priority for them. And then he said that they actually already had training and that they were going to put training on the calendar for 2022. So now again, that was my police chief. No, I cannot say that will be everyone's experience, but I can also, if you would like the template email that I sent, I can send that out too. So Maria, you might need to, there you go. So that was, next question is, if I were involved in a car accident, is it recommended that I get out of the vehicle and wait until the police arrive, especially if I have my child with disabilities with me? Is it better to be out of the vehicle or in the vehicle?
Well, I think that would be determined on your situation. If you think it's dangerous to be out of the vehicle, that you may have a child that could bolt and run. If you feel more secure inside the vehicle, obviously, if the vehicle is dangerous to be inside, you've got to exit the vehicle. So don't stay in a vehicle that is in a dangerous position. If the vehicle is safe off the roadway and it's a safe position to stay in the vehicle, and you think that is the best decision for you and your child, that because they may run, that might be safer. But if the vehicle is a dangerous place, you need to exit that vehicle. And when you do, obviously keeping your eyes on your child and staying in a safe place, but make sure you have some kind of plan that if you do find yourself in a car accident and you're on the side of the road somewhere that you're not familiar with, that you have a plan to be able to keep eyes on your child. But again, if the car is in a dangerous, compromised position, that it could be struck by another vehicle as you sit in it, get yourself to a safe place. Don't remain in a dangerous place. But that could be the case, that you're out of the vehicle. Just know that your child could run, and you're just going to have to remain very vigilant and watching your child. When the officers show up to take the wreck report, I would let the officers know immediately that, my child could run. Just be mindful of it, because when they show up, they're in control of the scene, and they just need to know that as well. And that's just kind of keeping good communication with them.
We also have a question of, do you think it's relevant to add psychiatric medical diagnoses to things like the PAL form? Is there a benefit to sharing private information like that?
Well, that's, again, this is private information for you. If you're sharing it properly, it's gonna remain private. If you share that with a local agency's dispatch, they're not going to go and disseminate that information to the public. I would say any information that you feel that you want to share that could help an emergency responder, help your loved one, then I would think that you would want to share that. Now, I would leave that up to the individual caregiver or the guardian or whomever that might be. That's obviously voluntary information, but if it is something that the officers or the first responders you think should know that would help them stay safer, be a better interaction, I think it's worthwhile letting them know. But important to remember, this is not sharing it again with neighbors and people that you don't know for just any reason. This would be for an emergency response, and that information, and you can ask them, make sure, but it is going to be this way, but say, listen, this is confidential information we're sharing you to help us, and it's going to remain confidential within their system. The only people that would have access to any kind of system like that would be people that are obviously sworn personnel in law enforcement or fire department. And it's going to be people that have access to that. The general public's not going to have access to that.
All right, and our last question. Hello and good afternoon. I hope all are well. I have a question. What can I do if I go to the police in my city wanting to know about policemen in my area, and they tell me there are not designated policemen for my area? What can I do?
Well, let me make sure I understand that question. Are you saying that you live in an area that has no police coverage, or no, if you call 911, you don't know who shows up?
That was a question from Javier. So if Darren or whoever's doing interpretation can ask him for a little bit of clarity, and then they'll let us know. So while we're paused and waiting for Javier, Dr. Hill, did you get the links from Maria for the questionnaires?
I did not. I checked my email.
Okay.
And I'll check it again right now.
Okay. Que no tenían so Javier is saying that they do not have police designated for the area.
To be honest with you, that's the first I've heard somebody living in an area that didn't have police response. Typically, if you live in a city, it would be a city police department and municipality. If you live outside of a city's jurisdiction, you're in the county, which would be considered like an unincorporated part of the county. You will be covered by the county sheriff's office. That's typically how that works. If not, obviously you can contact us and we can help you further with that information. But typically everybody has law enforcement coverage, either with the county or with the municipality that they live within.
Okay, it looks like that he's saying that there are police from Alabaster in the area.
Yeah, then if he lives in Alabaster, he's covered by Alabaster Police Department.
Okay.
And if he's outside Alabaster city limits, then he's going to be covered by the Shelby County Sheriff's Office.
Shelby County Sheriff's Office. And is that, just as a follow-up for his information? Oh, he said Alabaster policeman pass by. But that could be any. Okay, so we're saying either Shelby County or Alabaster. And if Shelby County, Maria, are you able to interpret if Javier asked the question out loud? I think Maria might be on the phone struggle bus.
¿Me escuchan? Can you hear me, Dr. Drew?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, yes. I'm so sorry. My computer froze, but okay. So
Javier,
should I open Mr. Javier's microphone? Can you open it up? Because I don't think that I have access to do that with my phone.
Oh, I was just going to say the links are now in the chat too for the questionnaires.
Okay. Do you want to?
Señor Javier, se le va a abrir el micrófono para que pueda hacer la pregunta y con gusto la traduzco, lo interpreto.
I'm not sure. And we can also, Maria, do you know Javier? Could we email him or get his contact information separately?
Yes, we could do that.
Okay, so do you want to have him message one of us his information and we can follow up?
Yes, I will do that.
Yeah, and then we can get more detail for him and explain.
Perfect. Okay, well, that was our last question. And then Dr. Hill, do we have the SurveyMonkey survey, or do you want to send that out as an email later?
Dr. Drew?
Yeah.
I could send that email later on with both of the links for the post test and also for the ACDD if you want to. And also I could add the PowerPoints and also copy of the PALS forms along with the autism ID form for the families.
That's going to be an important email for everybody. When you see that SurveyMonkey link, that's very important because the ACDD takes the information from that survey and forwards it, and they have to report that to the government. So that gets forwarded because they get federal money. And the fact that we are collaborating between 3 ACDD grant holders, if you could comment about that, that was such a, that what you thought of that, that might be helpful as well.
And the more forms that we get filled out, the more they know that we're doing good work and that Mr. Chandler is doing good work and that the people at AKeep are doing good work. And that helps us to get more funding to provide more presentations like this. So we do appreciate y'all participating in those surveys. We see them when they come back and they are so helpful. So thank you to everyone. And thank you for Mr. Chandler for all of the information that you gave and for answering all the questions. I know that This is a very difficult topic for people to think about, for people to hear about. It is not fun to think about. It's not, does not make you feel necessarily better to think about these things, but if we can prepare and think ahead rather than waiting until something bad or difficult happens, it seems like we can really help our loved ones, young adults and children to be safe. So we so appreciate your time and all of your support with this.
Oh, no, thank you guys for doing what you guys do. It was great having this. And thank you for having me. And to everybody, we're there to help you as well. Feel free to reach out with contact information from these great people here. Please have a wonderful and safe weekend, and God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dustin. We'll see you Tuesday. We will do a repeat performance on Tuesday at 10 a.m. for professionals and parents. Again, we will have Spanish interpretation, and we'd like to thank Mr. Reed and Miss Baker because they do a wonderful job. And we also want to thank Miss Joe and Miss Du for doing the Korean interpretation. Although we will not have Korean interpretation on Tuesdays, it's just on the Friday night one. So we'll see everybody Tuesday at 10 a.m.
Thank you, everybody. I hope that everybody enjoys their weekend.
Have a good
Thank you,
weekend,
Mrs. Chandler.
y'all.
Bye-bye.